Yeah, you go in the far end. Well, welcome everybody. I don't think anyone needs any introduction here, well, apart from me. I'm Dermot Murnaghan from Sky News. We've got David here and Anthony Geffen, who's worked on all the 3D projects for Sky so far with Sir David. Now, what we want to do is, really, first of all, is get your specs on and have a look at some very brief clips of the body of work so far. What it will show you, and this is what we're going to discuss afterwards, what it will show you is two things, I suppose, is the relationship between the technology and the subject matter, how I suppose there's really a kind of circular relationship between those, and also the progression of the technology itself, how in a very short space of time that has evolved as well, and opening up a wider range of possibilities in terms of the subject matter. Then, of course, we will have, I'm sure you will have loads and loads of questions for Anthony and David. We'll have plenty of time for that. So we'll show the film right now, and then we'll have an interview, and then we'll have the question and answer session. So don those spectacles, polish them up, and roll. I don't think you say roll VT on 3D, do you? Let's roll it. So you've seen, well, a total of 5 projects there, 4 of which have been transmitted so far, so a little glimpse of the next one as well. 4 transmitted, as I say, I think a total of 8 programmes for television and, of course, the films as well. I want to kick off then by asking both David and Anthony about the genesis of the idea. Let's go back to flying monsters. And to what extent did, when it was pitched to you, or did you pitch it to them? It's the chicken and egg question, really, David. Which came first, the technology or the desire to do that subject?
He came first, in the sense that we were out in the Rockies, weren't
Calgary,
we?
Yeah.
Making a 2D film for BBC One on fossils. And one night, Anthony comes down and says, I've been talking to Sky. They want a 3D programme. Can you think of an idea? You know, quick. We talked about it a bit, and then in the morning I think I suggested, well, I mean, what went through my mind was, first of all, you don't know anything about 3D, you know, so you better be careful. The second thing is that I did know that the 3D cameras are in effect 2 big cameras lashed together with their lenses at the same distance apart as our eyes are apart. And I thirdly knew that they were mostly lash-ups and difficult and subject to all kinds of perils. So I didn't want to be too difficult. And so I thought, well, what I need is a subject which isn't going to run away while we try and sort out these problems. And I hit on the idea of fossils, because they don't run away, you see. They'll be there just as long as the camera was there. And then, okay, so fossils, fine. Now, the other thing I knew was that computer-generated imaging is comparatively easy in 3D, because everything's under your control. So you can get terrific 3D images using computers. So fossils, computers, they go together very well. And what would, if we're going to do on fossils in 3D, you want something that moves in 3D. I mean, animals that move, dead animals, but nonetheless animals that moved in 3D, not just on the ground, but in the air. And of course there's a much neglected subject of fossils that fly, and that's pterodactyls, or pterosaurs, to give them their technical name. So I said pterosaurs, and we wrote out something quickly. I think it was the next day Anthony came down and says, "You're on, when do we start?" Well, it's true, isn't it?
It is, very true.
It's that simple. I mean, did it help, Anthony?
Well, no, I didn't want that simple. I mean, I think that something to do with Anthony, of course.
Yeah, well, I do.
But also, they actually wanted something in 3D.
So, I mean, did it help, Anthony, that David, as he's just demonstrated there, so fully understood the possibilities, but also the restraints of the technology?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about David is David's been through all the different technology revolutions that have happened, you know, from black and white to colour to HD. So, you know, David saying he didn't know anything about 3D. He probably knew as much as anybody about 3D because he understands the technical process. And he was able to identify a very good subject, because at that time we weren't able to do lots of shots. The equipment was very heavy. And we started out on our 3D journey in rather an ambitious way, saying we were going to make them theatrical as well as for television, which meant we were shooting them at a very high resolution. And that gave us another challenge, which was to use the biggest, most complicated equipment right out of the box. But it was the right subject to start with. And in a way, David would probably disagree in some ways, because he sometimes likes, your programs sometimes take a while to make, quite rightly, but we had a ridiculous time in a way to make it, which was 9 months. And that focused the mind, didn't it, David?
Oh, yeah.
And then, so let's move it on then, because we can kind of see, can't we, the subject matter changing, because you then moved on to The Bachelor King with the penguins. Obviously they're, they move a bit.
Yeah, well,
and did the technology change as well?
A bit. I mean, by the time we had made Flying Monsters, I discovered, to my surprise, I mean, I initially thought, wildlife, fantastic subject for 3D. But the fact of the matter is that you can't use long telephoto lenses in 3D. The reason is quite simple, that you get the 3D effect from these two cameras, which, if you look at your finger like that, this eye gives you one view, and that eye gives you the second view, and that gives you... Your brain works to meld those, and that gives you the impression of 3 dimensions. But if you're filming something across the other side of this theatre, for example, if you use a different view of your eyes, the view you get is almost exactly the same. So you can't see any difference. And so if you just film here, whether a normal lens or a 3D or a long focus lens, you won't get 3 dimensions at all. And you could say, okay, in that case, if you want to get different images, why don't you separate the two components? And the answer is, if you do that, you're then cross-shooting. So if your subject is here, one camera gives you that view, the other camera gives you that view, the backgrounds are different, so they don't work. So you can't use long focus lenses. And if you said to a wildlife cameraman, I want you to go and make a killer-diller program that's going to knock them out, in 3D and in 2D, but you can't use a longer than 75mm lens, he would think you're out of your mind. So we had to think of something that was going to be real animals, but you could get close to. And I immediately, well, I didn't immediately, but I eventually thought of penguins. Because the great thing about penguins, well, the two great things about penguins, one is they don't give a damn, I mean, they just stand there like that. And the second thing is that one penguin is very like another penguin. And that means that if... I need to say no more. And if someone says they diddled us, it wasn't the same penguin all the way through, they're right. And I don't care.
All those questions you're going to ask, he's answered in one go. I mean, it clearly helped Anthony, didn't it, in kind of evolving the idea that David just knew what kind of creatures would suit the next stage.
Well,
I mean, what ended up in the waste paper basket when you ended up with penguins?
Well, there were things because actually, although David was absolutely right, he did send us to one of the harshest places on the planet. You get katabatic winds, you get everything that 3D cameras don't really like, really. Which is
this is South Georgia.
South Georgia, close to the Antarctic. So you don't, there are problems. But David was absolutely right. We had to, we could get in, we could get very close. They actually got used to us filming, and the team did a phenomenal job. But we learned a lot there. I mean, in all these films, we've been on the sort of pushing the technology. We had to work out how to make sure the mirrors weren't going to get wet. Some of those elephant seals are quite tiresome when they come trundling at the cameraman. In fact, they destroyed all the crew's tents at one point. So, there are complications, but David's suggestion was perfect, because we were living in a world that we could actually film in 3D properly.
And there's one additional thing, actually, and that is that I calmly wrote in the script, we get wonderful underwater sequences of not paying any attention to the fact that nobody nobody had filmed in 3D underwater.
At that time, yeah.
And Anthony said, ready? He says, underwater. I said, yes. And he said, oh, well, we'll build one, which you did.
Yeah, we built an underwater rig, yeah.
So, just tell us a bit about that. I mean, because you know, this is the issue of you were evolving the technology, you were at the boundaries there.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, you know, first of all, we had to get the cameras to survive the conditions, and then David had thrown a nice curveball to us, film underwater. So we literally worked with On-Site and other providers to build a very an underwater housing. But there are all sorts of problems with that, in that it's you know, because it's so big, you know, how do you manoeuvre it? I mean, we had to sort of relearn the grammar of how to shoot underwater, because this is a big thing with both cameras on it.
But it didn't work to start with.
Well, it cracked and blew out.
Blew up. Okay.
So you know, there's actually
Blew in,
it blew in. You're quite right, David. It blew in. But it was very good for the behind-the-scenes film because it produced a wonderful moment where the cameraman practically lost his eardrums, and this thing comes up and it's completely shattered. You know. But we learned. You know, we built another model and a cruise ship, because there's no other way of getting to South Australia. A cruise ship dropped it off at some other end of the island. The crew went and found it and brought it back, and that one worked.
Just happened to find it there.
The other useful thing about South Georgia is that king penguins, actually, their breeding cycle, it takes them more than 12 months to hatch to being free. So it takes them actually about 14 or 15 months. And that means that there are, at any one time on South Georgia, there are chicks, there are half-grown chicks, there are chicks molting, and there are young adults, and there are adults courting at any one time. Yeah. So we were able to, with quite a short period,
capture the
on
whole,
the island, get every stage in the life of a penguin's life, of the king penguins. And so we were then actually able to give the film a structure in which, in fact, you did trace from hatching or courtship, hatching, and right to the end of the sequence.
But by the end of it, we were able to lay tracks around the penguins and do sort of tracking shots, you know, which is quite a luxury with animals, because you don't normally do, you know, tracking close-ups. I think the funniest shot of all in the behind-the-scenes film is where there are 6 penguins watching the crew filming. Yeah. And they were as interested in the filming as we were.
I thought they were actually helping out. I mean, okay, so I'm going through the progression here. So we have the CGI, the flying monsters, the fossils. Then we get the penguins and moving a bit, but being fairly placid. But then you went to plants. I mean, in a sense, with Q, in a sense, you could have seen that being, looking at it from the outside, being number 2 in the sequence. Why was it number 3? What extra were you able to put in there by the time the technology had developed a little bit more?
Well, what we had learned was that close-ups are the thing. I mean, they are the really exciting things. We don't actually see the world in 3D if it's over there. You only see 3D when it's close up. So we decided we'd do something in really close up. And also, by that stage, we had learned how to do time-lapse. Oddly enough, time-lapse in 3D is actually easier than normal filming, because in time-lapse in 3D, what you do is to take one frame, then you wait a second one, then take a second frame, and third frame. Now, if you have one camera, and you want to take a time-lapse sequence, you take an ordinary camera, take one click, and then there's a mechanical thing which just moves it a little distance that's required and takes a second clip. So you actually shoot 3D time-lapse with a 2D camera. So that was not bad either. Plants were the thing. Now, we couldn't afford, or wasn't practical, to go around the world filming plants worldwide, but fortunately there are plants from all the world right here in Kew Gardens. So we made it absolutely clear that what we were going to do was located in this one very remarkable site in London of Kew, where you've got plants from Australia and South America and Africa and the Arctic and so on. And it worked out quite well.
It certainly did. I mean, I was thinking of all the remarkable places in the world you filmed, the remote and out-of-the-way spots. This was some rather on your own doorstep, wasn't it?
That's right. You could have breakfast and then come down and go back for lunch.
Fantastic stuff. OK, well, let's move it on, because I don't want to take this all up talking amongst ourselves. We want to get...
Can I just bring in there that one of the interesting things about Q was we actually used 9 different systems to capture it. So it wasn't, you know, we'd started to do the sort of super close stuff but on benches and on periscopes and things like that. But we had 9 different kinds of systems. So we were really, the great thing about David's decision to make it at Kew was we were able to literally spend a year using different systems, time-lapse, and we learned so much about, the 3D, especially macro 3D photography. It was a sort of great incubation period for us, and we couldn't be doing the things we then went on to do without that year of experience. It was like a giant lab all on our doorstep.
I mean, and presumably a large team.
Very large team, but we were able to learn very quickly. You have to, I think in David's earlier series they pioneered, all sorts of amazing things, filming from helicopters, different cameras. This was a really great learning curve for us. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to blow smoke up my employer's posterior, but how accommodating were Sky with? I mean, it must have been a huge spend here.
I think
we're developing.
I think it goes without saying. Sky, it was a long time I was at the BBC. And now I'm lucky enough to run my own company with a lot of other talented people, but they have been incredibly supportive. They've looked to push us to technology. They've supported it financially, and that takes a vision. I mean, it really does. This is a company that pushed HD. They've really been out there, and they've been on the edge, because when they first commissioned us, David, we weren't quite sure what we were coming back for. And these are very, very large budgets, but I think we've delivered. We've delivered in the cinema for them in other ways, but they've been nothing but supportive throughout this process. It's a great leap to make.
And then, in terms of transmissions, we've seen the 4th project, the big one, Galapagos, David. And it's rather appropriate, isn't it? We're talking about evolving the technology, and there you were in the cockpit of the theory and all the rest of it. I mean, it seemed a natural one to do, but you couldn't have done that first off, presumably.
Oh, absolutely not. And the thing about Galapagos, we were then able to use all the things that we'd learned. Because from a biological point of view, the fantastic thing about the Galapagos is animals are absolutely tame. They will do their courtship, as you saw in those albatross, for example. The camera was within 3 or 4 yards of them, because the animals on the Galapagos have no fear of human beings. And so you can have a crew of 10 people, and they will just go on doing what they're doing. And therefore, with that, we were able to use standard techniques, because we did a lot of insect stuff in the Galapagos, which is quite important. So we had macro, we had time-lapse, and also because we wanted to illustrate that the key to understanding the Galapagos natural history is time, because the islands have evolved over time, we could use lots of computer-generated images too, very properly. So all the techniques that we had learned to produce the variety of subjects that we had, we were able to deploy in Galapagos.
Yeah. And I want to ask you this, Andrew. Anthony, there's this issue of, you kind of think 21st century 3D, it's shiny, spanking technology, it's all going to work. You must have found occasions when, my goodness me, you're miles away from any technological help. You've got this kit. You must have had to bodge it. Heath Robinson.
No, I think the real truth about we have very close alliances with it's a real team thing, 3D. A real team from the camera crew all the way across, but also again partners like On-Site who we've worked with since the beginning, and various cameramen and things. And what we're up against are something that still looks like it's Heath Robinson in terms of wires all over the place. And we had a backup team there. We had 2 crews. We had a backup team for about 5 months in all. And we were literally, David will probably tell the story better than me, but things would snap and people would come up with ingenious ways of solving a problem.
You tell the story in that case.
No, you tell it, David.
Well, some of the mechanics, the electronic mechanics, went wrong in one of the cameras, after a bit of investigation, it was clear that a conjunction had broken, a junction, and of course we're talking about millimeters. And how were you going to mend this? The nearest lab that could do it professionally was 500 miles across the Pacific in California or somewhere. And we were all set up. We had a super shot of a penguin, actually, standing exactly where we wanted it, with a nice black lava lizard sitting at alongside. Just great. And we were just about to start it. We're so pleased to have got it, and the camera didn't work. And after a bit of research, they discovered that one of these junctions had broken. And we thought it was the end. And then one of the blokes thought, hang on, we've got a medical kit. Hypodermic syringe. We could put one end lead on the top of the back end of the hypodermic syringe, and then we could use the needle of the hypodermic syringe just to put it into the one little place where the junction had to go. And they did that, and not only did it work, but the penguin was still there.
You see, they're good, those penguins, aren't they? They're well trained, those penguins.
But Dermot, one of the things I think that, and I think David would agree, we've been very lucky with it, it's not just the support, but it's the continued support, because what it's allowed us to do over several years is to bring forwards a whole group of talented people from all sides who we've been able to grow. And I think Galapagos, for me, was a kind of was the peak of that, where suddenly all the talent we'd grown over 3 or 4 films came together, and now we're able to push forwards on a number of different films in the future with talent that's grown, because it's a new way of thinking. 3D isn't just going out and shooting the same old things in the same way. It's actually thinking with the kind of budgets that we've got to work with and the kind of technology that's now becoming available, how can we think differently? How can we make it a different experience? Otherwise, 3D is dead. So people have got to, really push the boundaries. And it's only luckily by Sky backing a batch of projects and creating Colossus, which is a company that will bring this talent together, and having the brilliance of David on board, that we can do that. And that's been fantastic for a new medium, it really has.
But are there ever times, I mean, we talked about the frustrations and the rewards. Are there ever any times when those frustrations, on a day, on a bad day, kind of outbalance the rewards?
Oh, there's some terrible days. Aren't there, David? We sat there. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, I insist you go ahead.
So polite. It's not like that on location.
No, well, most of the technical problem, this is a technical problem, I say, oh, well, there's a technical problem, that's your job. Script problems are my problem. Technical problems are his problem.
No, I mean, there are a lot of frustrations, a lot of complications. And the frustrating thing is, you're in a place like the Galapagos and you've got amazing things happening around you. And your instinct is to whip out a 2D camera and shoot it, as David says, on a long lens or something else. And you can't do that. You've got to have the equipment working, the lenses, all allied, otherwise you haven't got a shot. And that's frustrating at times.
I think it's worth saying, actually, that comparing the experience of the Galapagos with Flying Monsters, which was only 2 years earlier, I mean, the Flying Monsters camera, this big?
At least that big, yeah.
Yeah, about this big. Yeah. By the time we get to the Galapagos, it's about that big.
Yeah.
And a crew of 12 in Flying
per
Monsters.
Unit, yep.
Yeah, in Galapagos, I think 4 or 5.
Yeah, probably about 6. Yeah, half. Yeah.
Wow.
Per unit.
In the space of 3 years, which I think has set it up rather nicely to throw it out to our wonderful audience here, because you've got a future project, well, a couple of future projects to talk about. We've got the development of the technology to talk about as well, and I'm sure we're going to hear questions along those lines. We've got a microphone out there if you want to hold your hand up, and others, if you want to get your hands up, we'll get the microphones to you so we can get as many questions in as possible. Yes, 3 rows in.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you both, what do you think of 4D?
Well, it depends which your 4th dimension is. Is it smell?
No, Ford.
No, that's a good answer, but it could be lots of different things. There's lots of different definitions of it, and we work in 4D, so I was interested to know what your interpretation
Which is your
of it was.
4th dimension?
Well, actually, we're in slightly disagreement about it, but generally speaking, when we've done it, we have used scent.
Really?
We
Scent?
do
Yeah, well, that's what I
4D
said.
projection mapping and projecting onto buildings, and we've also used scent in order to sort of augment the experience.
Well, they are showing, in fact, material in New York, in Central Park, New York. They're showing material culled from the Penguin film and calling it 4D because they have seats that shake and wind that blows when you sit in there, and so that's what they call 4D.
I mean, and it shouldn't be forgotten that all the films have shown very successfully in cinemas and places where you can have that experience. It's unlikely you're going to be getting 4D on your 3D screen at home.
Well, you never know. This guy's
Yeah, well,
got something up its sleeve.
Yeah.
Be part of the package soon.
Shaking chairs and smelly vision. I don't know, whoever's got the microphone, I've got you two in my sights. We get a microphone to use 2 rows up and 1 in the front row. So are you first?
Given the reliability of the equipment, was there any temptation to use post-conversion?
Use conversion. Was there a temptation to use conversion?
Well, that's a technical question.
Yeah, okay.
He's a stickler.
It might be a script question in a minute. Anyway, basically our general rule on these films is that we are looking to do native 3D because that's what we're doing here. But of course, we have a rule, I think it's a 15% rule. There are odd shots that you get that we have, that we have converted. I mean, we've never made any bones about that, but we keep it to an absolute minimum. And it works very well. But what's interesting is once you start to push that up, I think you notice it. And I don't think the audience probably sits there and says, oh, that's converted, that's not converted, because in fact we usually fool people on what we convert because it's all mixed together. But I think, some people have now said, isn't conversion so good you can just shoot 2D and then convert the whole lot? I think you really do notice the difference. And you certainly, for us, would notice the difference on an IMAX screen. So we might get away with some of it on television, but we're shooting for different platforms. And on a large IMAX screen or a cinema screen, you really would, I think audiences notice it when they go to the cinema and see a badly converted film.
Badly converting, of course, gives you a headache if you're not very careful. The quality you need to make a good conversion, if there is such a thing, is one where the background is absolutely uniform. Because of the problems about cross-shooting, which I was speaking about earlier. And so one of these areas where you can get similar uniform background, of course, is underwater. So a whale shark against a background of just straight blue, you can convert reasonably successfully.
You're giving away some of our shots now that we're converting.
I never said we had.
I've seen that one, yeah.
You hinted.
But anyway.
You could, in theory, do a whale shot.
Yeah. To be come to a screen near you soon. Now, who had the microphone? There we are, in the front. I lost it.
Is there any film from your back catalogue in particular that you think would have really benefited from the modern 3D technology we have now?
Good question.
Oh yes. I mean, I did a series called Life in the Undergrowth, for example, which was nearly always close-up. I mean, it was about scorpions and spiders and that sort of thing. And if we'd have shot it in 3D, it would have been a winner. Well, we're doing our best now because we're covering some of that area, at any rate, with our next project, which is on micro monsters, as you saw.
Thank you.
I mean, having raised that, let's get the microphone to you. Look, I know I've got the lights in my eyes. There may well be people, I'm taking nearly all from the front there, there may be people further towards the back who've got their hands up. And there's a gentleman way at the back who we will get to there. But first of all, we'll have that question.
Has there been any request to, even just for the television platforms, to take some of your library and do a conversion just for the television and the tablet markets and these upcoming?
I don't think you could make a uniform rule that you could totally convert any one program that I can think of. I did, and put it into a converted 3D. I don't think it would work quality-wise. I mean, the essence of 3D is, after all, that it is magnificent, one mind-blowing quality. And if you lower the quality, then you're defeating the object of the enterprise. And my back catalogue, the BBC's back catalogue, which belongs to them, I don't think is susceptible for total overall 3D conversion.
Okay, we'll take that question then way up in, the gods to us.
Outside of your own work, what do you two think of the state of 3D as experts in the field in your own rights? How do you think it is at the moment in terms of the stuff we're seeing at the cinema?
I'd put the Life of Pi right up there myself. Life of Pi, I thought, was a magical use of course, CGI generated 3D. I gather that Ang Lee was here, or rather giving interviews over the satellite. And I wish to goodness I'd been there to hear him talk. But for those who haven't seen Life of Pi, it involves a boy who is cast away in a raft with a number of animals, including a tiger. And the interplay between the tiger and the boy is absolutely convincing. I mean, I know the stuff, and when I first saw it, I thought, crikey, this lad's going to be eaten alive, you know. And it was so convincing, it didn't occur to me that it was CGI. But of course, after it goes on a bit, if you're in the business, you say, well, that must have done that.
It's good enough to fool you.
It was terrific, wasn't it?
No, it was brilliant.
No, your take
I think what we've got is a very patchy situation right now, and I think that's confusing the audiences. We get some very good ones like that, and we get some other ones which are not great. Now, of course, what we all know is that it's the story that matters and not the 3D. So you've got to get a combination of really good 3D with a really good story. I think we're in a bit of a flux right now, and I think there are lots of things that could change, you know, glasses-free television and everything else. But actually, what we need are a number of really good 3D television films coming through and theatrical films. That's what's going to restore confidence. You know, we can have, you know, I'm very excited about getting a tablet that's 3D, but there's not a lot of content for it. You know, especially if we can't go back and get David's back catalogue in 3D, which I agree with him because of the format would be difficult. So I think we're in a flux, and I think, you know, there's soothsayers and there are not, but I still think when I see something like Life of Pi, I think, wow, how good 3D is. I think it works very well for the cinema when it's in that slightly surreal world, another world there. That's why I think it worked particularly well. But roll on good 3D, and we'll all be waiting for the Great Gatsby, won't we? Let's hope that's good.
I mean, it's an interesting point you make about the story, Anthony, because back to those films that those series you've made. I mean, the thing that struck me instantly, going back to just even the very first one, to Flying Monsters, David, was just how intellectually rich that is. In actual fact, I went into it, to be honest, thinking, well, it's 3D, it's your first foray into it on television. It's going to be all about the pictures and these great monsters flying out of the screen at you and the rest of it. It was that, of course, as well, but it was driven by a theory and by a narrative, and that was very important to you, wasn't it?
I think, you know, if you make a film that's boring in 2D, it's going to be boring in 3D, really. And in many ways, it's like you can compare it to the coming of colour. The temptation when we first got colour television was to say, let's make everything scarlet and dress comedians in kilts and you know, have lots of banks of flowers and so on. Boring, boring, boring. If a comedian isn't funny, a colourful outfit is not going to make him funny, and it might beguile you for 5 seconds and that's it. So the best colour films, programmes, were those where in fact you got more information. You saw the colour of a person's cheeks, delicate stuff. You saw gentle things, and you weren't continually being punched in the face by saying I'm colourful. And now, if you don't mind that the news is in colour, particularly, or in black and white, but if you'd actually turned it to black and white, you would be aware you were seeing less of what was going on in front of the camera than you did. So the trick, in my view, that will make the difference between 3D as a goer for television is when you don't have to put glasses on. At the moment, it's no doubt about it, you put dark glasses on and you feel divorced from the people around you. Yeah. You can't see your wife or your children. You don't know what... So it's a whole palaver. Is this going to be in 3D? Where are the glasses? All that stuff. If you get a television screen which you don't need glasses for and can see in 3D, you will have television sets which will show 3D all the time. And you will be aware of it sometimes, and sometimes you will not. And that'll be...
And that will then lead to that virtuous circle. Then the money will flow into the productions.
I think the other thing that's happening is, I mean, talking from the 3 or so years we've been doing it, is 3D is changing in the sense that, you know, HD is sort of HD quality, but actually 3D and what we can do in 3D is dramatically changed. You know, the use of negative space, how daring we're allowed to be now by Sky coming out into negative space, what we can do, how we can push it. So it's actually a changing medium. So people say, what do you think of 3D? Well, that's 3D now, but the 3D we were doing 3 years ago is very different. It still works, I think, and it's still 3D. But what we're about to do, I think, is even more exciting, you know, and that is only possible because we found new techniques and different ways of shooting it. And I think that's what 3D has to do. Where we got into trouble with 3D in terms of everybody saying, oh, it's going to be the whole future, which was never going to happen, not quickly, was that you know, the technology and the stories hadn't really caught up. And I think now is the chance to be honest with you, for broadcasters to invest in 3D and think of the different platforms if they can't afford to do it just for television. Because the potential is there. The mediums are moving on, and it needs some innovative people from a number of different genres to bring it forward. But it's not going to be everything. So that period is a long way into the future. And I think the feeling that I think David and I both have about it is that, you know, with no glasses, it's another channel and it's an event, and you'll see certain things on that 3D channel, but you'll just think of it like another channel that's a specialist and very exciting experience. Yeah. And I think, you know, over the next few years, let's get that channel right before thinking it's got to be everything. But also, let's think multi-platform, because you cannot finance 3D very easily from just television.
Okay. Been neglecting our audiences. So, right, loads of hands coming up here. Well, let's get some microphones to you. Who's got a microphone? We need them both. We need them both down here. Whoever gets it first will have yours, and then we've got 1, 2, and 3 there. You get one there, please.
Do you think people are being impacted by documentaries about climate change and global warming?
If not, do you think that the documentaries need to become more hard-hitting, and is 3D an essential part of that?
I didn't get the last one.
Well, I mean, do you think that documentaries have to become more hard-hitting, pointing out the dangers of climate change?
Would they benefit from being in 3D, basically? I think that's what you're saying, yeah.
I wouldn't have thought they would have benefited it because it's an intellectual argument rather than a visual one. So the intellectual argument of climate change, I wouldn't have thought it made any difference to you in believing it or not, or doing something about it or not, whether 2D or 3D. I mean, 3D programs have more impact, it's perfectly true. But for the truth of the argument, it wouldn't make much difference, I wouldn't have thought.
Okay.
Just going back to sort of cross-genre and outside of television, I was just wondering if you'd explored at all using holograms with the shows that you've actually created as a way of not using glasses to try and get the same effect.
So holograms, so it would come to
we haven't. I mean, there's all sorts of interesting things happening. I mean, we've got our work cut out with 3D at the moment, so we haven't yet moved into the hologram territory. But I'm sure there's great potential in that.
We have, the only time where we haven't done television, but in the Natural History Museum, I was involved in making a film in which you do use a hologram, in which you go into the place and you actually have a thing that looks like a hand mirror. And in fact, it's a television screen, but it also has a small camera in the back of it. So you hold the camera and you look around, you can look around like that, and you can see your surrounding, you can see all your friends on your screen here. And then you do certain things happens in doing the program, and then a dinosaur actually walks down the steps that you can see over there, except you can't see the dinosaur, but there's a hologram of when you look on here, here is one walking down. And the effect on the audience is quite entertaining.
It would be really interesting to use some of your shows using holographic techniques. You should try it out.
We're open to everything.
If there's some investment from you. Now you have a question there. I think you had your hand up first, woman in the red jumper.
It's following on from the 4D and the holograms. I wondered what Sir David expects there to be in our living rooms in decades' time in terms of wildlife programming. And second of all, do you think sometimes that the 3D format sensationalizes it, makes it seems to me more than your previous programs? And thirdly, do you think the animals under Galapagos...
Let me just do... Let's just do one at a time.
You can do sensationalising, and you can do... you can answer.
What was the question about sensation?
Does 3D sensationalise
the natural history?
You can do the future.
No, I mean, it converts... It no more sensationalises than 2D. I mean, you can do sensational programmes, and we have done sensational programmes in 2D, and you'd use the same sort of techniques in you do in 3D. But I don't think it makes the turning into a sensation is not so much the technique as in fact the skill in which you tell the story. And 3D will give you added impetus, but I don't think fundamentally change.
Yeah. I mean, your trick has always been trick, I say. blessing has always been to almost be understated, and as you said before, it's the subject matter which is sensational. That cries out to you. Anthony, the future.
It's very difficult. There are lots of technologies, some of which will take off, some of which won't. I mean, if you believe Google, we'll probably be back to glasses, and we'll be watching everything on the inside of our glasses on their new glasses scheme. But I think, you know, what we're dealing with is super resolution television in 2D. You know, the kind of stuff that NHK have been working on, super high resolution, and that will blend beautifully with 3D where it's needed. So we'll go up to 11Ks, 12Ks, 13Ks. But one of the things that's interesting is looking at the NHK stuff is it's incredibly sharp, but without any dimension, extra dimension, that third dimension, it sort of becomes slightly surreal.
Does it become plasticky?
It does become, to me, quite plasticky. You know, not like Sky News, of course. It's never plasticky, but
where did that come from? Pay good money for that.
No, but there was No. I was only thinking that when HD cameras first
you are real, are you?
first went onto news. You know, people said, "God, it looks quite plasticky." But no, I think that's where I think it's going to go. I mean, I think, you know, who knows? There's talk of holograms and things, but I think that's where we'll be, and it'll be on flatter and flatter screens, and who knows, screens that you can bend and put up. But I think that's where we're going. But a lot of people say, oh, who needs 3D, because actually there's 4K, and I mean, you know, anyone who's been to any of these trade shows, if you watch 4K, it's great. But actually, this is we're now shooting in 5K for a start, and we often show things in 2D because Sky sensibly show it in 2D and in 3D. So, but actually, when you add the third dimension, it looks fantastic when it's appropriate.
Third dimension. There was a third part to your question. Very quickly, please, because I don't want you to hog it.
Will the Galapagos continue to be unafraid of humans, do you think?
Will the animals of the Galapagos continue to be unafraid of humans? I'm sure you're very, very sensitive.
The answer is yes. But they are the Galapagos and the Ecuadorian authorities are very sensitive to the value of what they have, both intellectually, as it were, and simply in terms of dollars. I mean, they are great economic treasure, and they take absolutely correct rules about what you're allowed to do and where you're allowed to go and what you're allowed to touch. And the animals, well, they've been going there. I've been going there for 40 years, and the animals are just the same.
Okay, I've been given the 5 minutes warning here, so if you have a burning question, you better get it in very quickly. You've got one, okay. Have you?
Also, following on a bit with the technologies, have you thought about high frame rates or different frame rates as well for with the 3D?
Yeah, we've looked at high frame rates, and I think it would be appropriate. But I have to say, the Hobbit, you know, was not a great example of playing with frame rates to me. You know, it looked like EastEnders, and you know, it was exactly what you don't want. I think with a this is the high frame rate.
I understand that.
I mean, the Hobbit itself looked fantastic when you saw it on a normal frame rate, but when he played with frame rates, it did not look great. It would look washed out. It didn't look very, you know, it wasn't a great success. So I think frame rates used in the right ways, but we wouldn't want to use, you know, play around particularly with frame rates with the stuff we're using at the moment. I mean, who knows? We've got some things coming up, we might play with that. But the stuff we've done so far, we wouldn't want to play with different frame rates.
Fascinating. Okay, we had a question up there.
I just wanted to know if you can remember when you were filming a really, really memorable shot, maybe one of the times where it looked pretty cool when you were filming it, but then you looked at it back in 3D and you just went, wow.
I can think of lots of times when I look wow. I think mostly they have been close-ups. And because the fact of the matter, as I've said earlier, you don't actually see things, big vistas in 3D anyway. And if you are using close-up cameras, I mean, like, for example, that sundew, that's only that big, you know, and the size of a sort of a 2p, 1 pound coin. And so it's tiny, so you'd have to look very close to see that. When you see it on a screen like this, in 3D, I say, wow. I mean, it really is amazing, that closing in on the insect, I thought was extraordinary.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we will. I just want to ask them very quickly about the future of that question, because I like one at the back, because we haven't had enough from there. if this question doesn't ask about your future projects. Let's hear it, please.
Hi, this is a question for David. Having seen how good the tiger was in Pi, and obviously that's a very dangerous creature to film, what creature would you like to film, living or dead, or recreate in a kind of CGI style? Maybe something traditionally you would film from a distance, but what would you like to see? If you could do anything, what would it be?
Well, I suppose some of these reconstructions of extinct animals, I would see lots of things I'd love to see. I mean, in Flying Monsters, we recreated a pterosaur with a 40-foot wingspan, and that was pretty good. I wouldn't mind seeing some of the other huge dinosaurs chomping around up Knightsbridge.
We'd love to see that. Well, is that one of your future projects? Tell us what you've got. I mean, anyone can steal that idea. I haven't got it. Ideas are money. We saw number 5. A little clip of that. Just tell us a little bit more about that there.
Micro Monsters. We have a problem of not being scientifically illiterate. If we'd called it insects and we showed scorpions and millipedes and spiders, the intellectually informed biologists here would say that spiders aren't insects, and indeed they're not. So we had to get a title which would cover the whole lot. And I think that some of the footage we're going to show you of spiders is just unbelievable, because of course spiders operate in 3 dimensions very much, and many webs are not just 2-dimensional like the orb web, but many are much more complicated like that. And if we can cover that properly to show how these spiders set these complicated 3-dimensional traps, I think it'll be a knockout.
Okay, and anything beyond that, Anthony, you can share with us?
I'm glad to say that I'm thrilled to be continuing with David in 2D, which we did with the BBC, but also in 3D, and we have 2 exciting projects which Sky will announce at some stage in the future, both of which I think will push the medium quite a long way, and we're really looking forward to making them, aren't we, David?
Okay. So watch this space. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Anthony Geffen and Sir David Attenborough. Thank you very much.